Hi, my name is Andy Ridlinger, and I am the developer of Stigma. Today, I'm going to be talking about what Stigma is, its goals, as well as the progress that has been made on it in the past 8 to 9 months. Stigma is massively inspired by the roguelite genre. New roguelites continue to come out, all with their own twists, such as Dead Cell's combat and progression system, Slay the Spire's deck building, and Hades' story and action. Stigma aims to mash together RPG elements with the roguelite genre. Thus, from its primary sources of inspiration, Stigma is like the combination of Risk of Rain 2 and Final Fantasy XIV's Deep Dungeons combined to create a new type of adventure. The pillars for the game are the core focus of how the game should play and feel. The player will unlock abilities and power up their character as they play, giving a sense of progression. The bosses and enemies will be interactive and require frequent movement so as to not get pinned down. You can dedicate as much or as little time as possible by reaching checkpoints so the playthrough can last for multiple sessions. And the levels will infinitely scale with the single goal of seeing just how powerful your character can become. The gameplay cycle consists of loading into a set of 5 floors, otherwise known as levels. Each floor will be procedurally generated and have an exit portal along with various enemies scattered about. The player will then search for the exit portal while defeating enemies to gain money, experience, and level up. Finally, the last floor will have a boss on it. Once the player defeats the boss, they will get a choice of 3 possible rewards to choose from. They will then be teleported to the market. At the market, they can spend their money and skill points to farther upgrade their character. And then they enter the portal and go through the floor set again, this time with more difficult enemies. The game developed mostly in the order of the ability system, followed by the stats and combat, then the dedicated hunter class and UI that accompanied that. The basic enemy AI soon followed, as well as the floor set system, reward system, shop system, and currency systems. The graphics were slowly added after that, first for the player and abilities, then the UI and the environment. Lastly, procedural generation, the minimap, keybind settings, and graphics for the enemies were added as well. Rather than exclusively talk about the systems though, it is better to just see them in action. So on to the gameplay. We start off in the main menu. Here there are just a few options. You can quit, go to the settings, which lets you change key bindings, and you can also start the game. When you first load in, you have access to 2 abilities. You can mouse over these by holding Alt to see what they do. The first ability and the second both generate focus, which is shown by the bar on the left. As you attack, that bar will fill up with a yellow color to represent how much focus you have out of 100. Enemies telegraph their attacks using orange markers that they place on the ground. After a certain amount of time, if you are still in the indicated area, you will be hit. They also perform basic auto attacks that are not telegraphed and are only dodgeable by getting out of range. As enemies die, you will both gain money, shown in the bottom right hand corner, called Decon, and you will also gain experience, which is represented by the lower bar on the screen that is filling up and has a 1 on the right hand side to indicate the player is currently level 1. The player also has a stats panel they can access to see their current max health, attack power, defense, crit rate, crit multiplier, movement speed, and skill points they gain from leveling. Upon leveling up, all the stats will increase, and the player will also be fully healed. The player also unlocks additional abilities as they level. In this case, it was Concussive Blast, which is just an instant cast that consumes 30 focus, which is the yellow bar, and generates 1 gunpowder, which is shown by the gray bar on the right and used for future abilities to perform high damaging attacks. The player also has access to a minimap. The minimap reveals more of the map as the player explores it. It will also indicate the player's position, as well as enemies as they show up on the map by a red cross. Now that the player has reached level 3, they have access to the Armor Piercer ability, which is their first ability that utilizes gunpowder. It deals a heavy hit as well as makes the target take 20% more damage for the next 10 seconds, and this effect does stack. Upon reaching the portal room, all the player now has to do is go through it to go to the next floor. This floor is also procedurally generated and has a new minimap to go along with it. Enemies have also had their level increased, causing them to deal more damage, have more health, as well as take less damage, but they also give more experience and money. Upon reaching level 4, the player gets access to the Poison Shot ability. This ability fires a poison bullet in a straight line in front of them. Anything it hits takes damage, as well as suffers a dot that does 20 damage every 3 seconds for the next 9 seconds. This new ability is great for taking on multiple enemies at once, as it can hit multiple targets as well as deal a large amount of damage. Each floor set consists of 5 separate floors, with the 5th floor being the boss floor. By this point, the player has unlocked 3 new abilities. The first is called Lost Focus, and buffs crit chance as well as damage done for 15 seconds. The next ability is called Hard Skin, and reduces damage taken by 80% for the next 20 seconds. Lastly is Sprint, which simply doubles your movement speed for the next 10 seconds. The first thing to notice when engaging the boss is it starts to cast a massive room-wide attack. This attack will kill the player if they do not use Hard Skin. The 80% damage reduction is required. The boss then continues to just do a series of very large telegraphed attacks. The player is currently maxing out both their focus and gunpowder bar to deal a massive burst of damage. They will first buff themselves with Lost Focus, debuff the boss twice with Armor Piercer, and finish with a Poison Shot, followed up into generating as much focus, concussive blasts, and armor piercers as possible before the buff is over. If coming into this fight at level 5, it is extremely difficult as the boss auto attacks fairly frequently, does a decent amount of damage, and the player has no way to heal besides leveling. Because of this, the level 5 player is in a race against time to kill the boss before the boss kills them, even if they manage to dodge all of the attacks. When the boss dies, a portal to the market appears in the center as he crumbles away. Before the player goes to the market though, they get a choice of 3 rewards. At the market, the player can either upgrade stats from the upgrade vendor, or purchase new skills and passives from the skill vendor. Stat upgrades cost Stekon, whereas the skill upgrades cost skill points. The skill points are shown at the bottom of the stats panel. As the player purchases health and attack, as well as movement speed, you'll notice the player now moves much faster than they previously did. Also, the skill vendor has passives now, such as lifesteal. Lifesteal makes it so that whenever you deal damage, you get a portion of the damage you dealt back as health, and is extremely powerful as it's a way of healing. The player also purchased the spin ability, which can now be set to number 9 on the ability bar. The spin ability is just the exact same ability that the mushroom enemies use. The player now moves on to the next floor set with their new abilities, where the enemies will continue to scale and level. With the player's newfound abilities, watch as they gather up a massive amount of enemies to AoE down all at once. The player must be very careful while grouping these enemies up, as even their auto attacks all combined at once can easily kill the player, especially with hard skin currently on cooldown. The player rushes into the middle of the pack with Lost Focus active, standing in all the AoEs while performing their own, goes down to 29 HP and then levels up getting a full heal, but they're struggling to escape as the serpents are slowing him. Their HP is dipping again, barely living through using lifesteal from the passive, but they manage to finish off the pack from long range using poison bullets. And all of the gameplay up to this point is the core of what Stigma is. Wrapping it up, there are some additional features such as the ability to change keybinds, and of course, every adventure must come to an end. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this look at Stigma.